Welcome to Indie Thinker with Reed Uberman. You're about to make the jump from the dishonest mainstream media into free and independent thought from key thought leaders on the subjects of culture, causes, politics, and faith. Welcome to Indie Thinker with Reed Uberman. I'm really excited to have a friend, a relatively new friend, but somebody that I consider a friend already on the show today. So Peppo Biscarini, thanks for being here, man.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. So the other day when we were talking at your house, just over dinner and stuff like that, we talked about some really, really interesting stuff that I think will help people kind of engage in some things that are very relevant. I want to talk to you about COVID since you're from Italy and you're just visiting here kind of temporarily and you're going to go back into the lion's den in just a little bit. I'd love to talk about kind of what happened from your perspective since that was like a real hot spot and a place where there was a lot of casualties and that kind of thing. And I want to talk with you mainly, not specifically about that, but mainly about some of the restrictions that were placed on you guys, because what you were telling me was like really, really super interesting. And I think it'd be interesting for people, especially in the United States, to hear what was going on in Italy during some of that that really high curve time in Italy. But then also too, I'd like to talk to you about just kind of what we're doing here at Indie Thinker, and then kind of the conversation that we had around the gospel, culture, and its impact on people and whether it should affect their head and their heart. And we'll kind of dig into a lot of that stuff. But before we do that, I would love to just get to know you a little bit better, let the audience get to know you too. So you have been an actor. You have been a model. You've done a lot of that stuff. You lived in LA for a while. And then you became this is the crazy thing. Like I was thinking, how do I classify what you do? But like we have the kind of silliest terminology in the American church for things. We call everybody a missionary who is not a pastor in the United States. I don't know if you've like seen that, but needless to say, you're a pastor, a minister, and you work all over Italy doing a bunch of different stuff, and you're about to jump into some new endeavors there. So tell us a little bit about kind of how you came to the States, and then tell us about your conversion experience, about how Christ came into your life.
Conversion is going to be a long one. Well, basically, the reason why I came to the States originally, that was back in 1979, was to actually train for the '84 Olympics. So I was a butterflyer, and at 15, I set a world record in long distance swimming. I was doing marathons. I was doing extreme sport before the term was even coined. It was kind of crazy.
So you were awesome before awesome existed, kind of.
Well, I wouldn't say I was awesome, but a kind of a crazy mind. Push the limit. How far can your body go? That was always kind of intriguing to me. And so when I had a chance to enter this world championship, was a long distance, was a 24-hour swim. I did. The federation actually shut me down because I was too young. So they said, okay, let's put you through some panels with some doctors, and if they give you a green light, then we'll let you race. So they gave me a green light, and I did it. Then I did some other crazy swim from Monte Carlo to Genova, which is another 187K. 115, 120 miles roughly. So crazy stuff like that. Nice. And then later on in life, I got crazy and I started doing what is called free diving, where you go deep underwater.
Yeah, where you hold your breath for long periods of time.
Exactly right. Hoping
so there's
to
no
come back.
Gear.
No gear. Well, only gear is the fins. So you power down and power up. There are different kind of competition. Some are done with a sled and a balloon. That's very extreme. Yeah. But power down and power up is the pure form, and that's what I was doing. I was the team captain at the World Cup.
So how long could you hold your breath?
I had a national record at 5:40. That was back in '98.
How long can you hold your breath now?
Now, not much, because I had COVID and actually had an effect on me. I can tell you that at the alveolar level, there's been some atrophy because I noticed, the shortness of breath. But probably now, maybe pushing 5 minutes and hurting.
Dang, that's still pretty good. I think I've got like a minute and a half, maybe.
A lot of it is mental.
Yeah.
A lot of it is mental. Actually, I got to train the Navy SEALs between 1992 and 1996. And a couple of funny stories. I did a pattern with them where they would hold their breath in interval. It's called a box. You breathe in, you hold, breathe out, hold. And before I started that, I said, okay, go ahead and just hold your breath. And most of them came up within a minute. It was insane. So I started kind of teasing us, and this is the best we got. Because that particular team, actually, they were the best of the SEAL. They were, in essence, represented the SEAL team in world competition with other military, units. And so, yeah, they were the best of the SEALs. And so I used to tease them, and they get all hyper and huffing and puffing. I say, that's exactly what you want to avoid. When you have adrenaline rush like that, it's going to just nail your oxygen. And so you take them through, a mental process of slowing everything down. And then I got him to do, I think the best guy did about 330 or so.
That's nuts. So how much was your heart? How fast?
Your
was
heart drops.
beat?
Your heart drops. Actually, I've done a video to kind of check that, and at the start it was pretty high. Actually, it was around, I think, 82, 85, somewhere in there. And then as I was approaching 4 minutes, was already down to maybe mid 40s. And then toward the 5th minute was down around 32 or so.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. It's a response. I mean, your body kind of shuts down. So
I imagine when you were doing all that, you were not a Christian. But when I see that stuff right now as a Christian, I look at like the amazing capacity the human body has, and think about the amazing creator that we have. I don't know if you've seen any of these documentaries on these free divers, especially in like I think it's almost like third world countries, but I don't want to say specifically because I can't remember. I think Dying to Dive was the name of one of them. But these guys could hold their breath, I want to say, for like over 10 minutes. It was nuts. I don't remember how long it was, but they basically have a culture of living and.
Are those the nomads that live on water?
Yeah.
They're a Philippine tribe. Yeah.
Okay,
that
yeah.
moves around, sure.
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't. It's been a while since I've seen it, and I think it's Dying to Die. But anyway, yeah.
Lamboajo, I think, is the island where they kind of come from. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've heard about these guys.
Yeah.
How long can they hold their breath?
They're saying that, and I think BBC or some of those channels, kind of gloat with that. Yes. Because the official, there is official war records. And even at that, you have to be careful because whenever you take oxygen, if you have oxygen intake, you can do about 3 times what you normally would. The only difference is that when you're doing it normally and you're pushing the limit, you will get into a black out situation.
Yeah.
So you lose consciousness. If you're taking in oxygen and you're pushing the limit, typically you have a blackout with cardiac arrest. So it's much, much more dangerous.
Right.
But yeah, the official, I think, is 10:30, 10:40.
Like the world record.
I haven't kept in touch, but yeah.
Yeah, so you were doing that. So that's super interesting. We didn't even talk about that the other day. So that's interesting.
It's okay. That was my prior life. But
so do you hold any records still?
The 24-hour record is still holding. Okay. That's 87 kilometers. It's 83.7 kilometers, sorry. It's about 52 miles roughly. Okay. It's done in kilometers. It was done in a swimming pool. So you had judges that clock you.
How long did that take you?
24 hours. The race is 24 hours. So it's a mental race, mainly. I mean, you got to be obviously in a good physical condition, but you're dealing with your mind going crazy. You're going back and forth in a 50-meter pool, staring at a black line, saying, "Oh, what am I doing this for?"
Yeah.
And so that's what I was telling you earlier. The fact that I was always challenging myself. What is the next goal? What is the next step? And it becomes almost a drug. Just like the person that wants to shoot up. Well, the adrenaline rush, or even worse, identifying yourself by what you do is a kiss of death. Mm-hmm. And so when I broke my back in January of '83, and that took me out of the games. That was really hard.
Yeah.
So I was a brand new believer, and I was screaming out to God, saying, "Oh, why did you do this to me? Mm-hmm. That was my last goal, and you took that away." So instead of looking at what is the lesson to be learned, there was just anger.
Yeah.
That's my final goal, and you stripped me away from that. And basically what God was showing me is, Peppo, I'm your savior. I'm not your Lord. I mean, you invited me in the car, but you told me sit down in that passenger seat while I'm driving where I want to go. And that's the thing.
I love that because that's the thing that I think I see with kind of the positive mental attitude form of Christianity today. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt that Christianity should make a positive impact on your life, right? That it should, that you should be a more positive person than a negative person when you become a Christian, for sure. And there's a lot to be positive about. But my concern with the positive mental attitude kind of stripe of Christianity, where it's just about what Jesus can do for you, misses out on who the person of Jesus really actually is in your life, and you're going to be robbed of that.
Absolutely. And sometimes I think we need to learn the hard way. In my case, he was just the genie in the bottle, right?
Yeah.
So, here it is, I need this, I need that. So I'm giving my shopping list. And, the cosmic God just dispenses whatever I ask for. And it's completely warped. So basically what he had to say is, no, I am Lord of everything, including your life.
Yeah.
So now you can ease into that if you want to. Or you're going to learn the hard way, And
see, that's kind of like the TED Talk version of Christianity for our generation. Is like self-improvement to the point where you realize that, one, I think you have to admit, even if you're not a Christian, that kind of mentality could be very self-centered. You get really self-absorbed in just being the best that you can be, and you're focusing on you so much that you forget that your life can make such a difference in the lives of other people. But more than that, if you make the mistake of what you just said and you follow that positive mental attitude movement just merely to its end, ultimately what you'll find is that you've made the mistake of equating that you are based upon what you do rather than who you truly are, like on the inside or anything else.
Big mistake.
Yeah.
Actually, I had a talk about that recently, and I had the chance, or the blessing, I should say, to experience that when I was 23 years old. So basically, God was showing me, Peppo, your identity is wrapped in what you're doing.
Yeah.
The moment you cease doing, you cease being. And that's a big mistake. So then I had to kind of rearrange my thinking and basically saying, who am I to your eyes?
Yeah.
And that's something that nobody can ever strip away from you. So when you're looking at the blessing, when you're looking at the way God views us, I mean, the amount of love that comes out of it, overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so that all of a sudden gives you that sense of, what can I do for you?
Yeah.
Because the gratitude that comes out of it is immense. And then all of a sudden you have a partnership that works. Yeah. Instead of just abusing of his power, you're actually easing into it, saying, okay, you have created me. So as the creator, I don't have the manual. My manual is messed up because the world is teaching me certain things, but you have created every part of me. So tell me how these parts are supposed to work. And then, I think you're ahead of the game if you kind of ease into it.
Yeah, for sure. So, I want to just walk down that path just a little bit because I think it's important. Because one of the things that's really popular, maybe you're aware of it, maybe not, on social media, even outside of the Christian world, is just the positive, and maybe it has always been, but there's a lot of guys my age now that are getting really popular on the positive mental attitude thing. You can do whatever you set your heart to, kind of thing. Just like whatever choice you make is good as long as you've made it in advance. I heard somebody say that the other day, and I was thinking, is that really what we're going to push? We're going to tell people whatever choice they make, as long as they're choosing to do it willfully, is a good choice. Like that kind of just platitudinal living, I think ultimately just leaves us dry and empty. And Augustine said this. He said, our hearts are restless until we find our rest in you. I can't help but wonder, especially with the advent of some of this stuff on social media, because you've got some amazing people like David Goggins. I don't know if you know who he is, who's just kind of encouraging people to push themselves to the limit. He's an ultra marathoner, so kind of like you were in the swimming world. And then you got people like Jocko Willink. And Jocko's like a real tough guy, gets up at 4 a.m., starts working out and all sorts of stuff, and just really they're not necessarily the positive mental attitude guys, but I'm just using them kind of as an example to just say that kind of that striving for personal perfection, while good on the one hand, ultimately can leave us very empty, I think, on the other hand. So I think it's interesting to say that your story just is very interesting in that respect, that you got to kind of the pinnacle of your athletic career, and then you broke your back, and you were left wondering, where does that leave me? And you ultimately had that great eureka moment that I think everybody needs to come to if they're really going to try to figure out what life is about and find intrinsic value in life, of saying that it's not just based upon what you do. It's bigger than that, because what if you break your back? What if you lose your legs and all of a sudden you can't identify as a runner anymore? You lose your arms and all that stuff.
And you see that also with business people. I've had the chance to talk to some very, very successful business people that are getting to the end of their career and they're feeling worthless. Yeah. Or people, even worse, they're saying, okay, I climbed so high to realize that my ladder was propped in the wrong building. Yeah. Then what do you do at that point? So I think God loves us so much that he gives us, throughout our lives, moments of, the eureka moment, as you said before, where you realize, what am I doing all this for? The getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, that's part of the discipline, sure. What is your final goal, though? Just to stay in shape, to push yourself? I mean, what are you trying to achieve? Yeah. And, with me, again, discovering the author of this, even on the physical sense, was really important. And then to, in essence, understand, that's what I'm struggling with even now. Ephesians 2:10 says that we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works that he predestined for us. So when you're looking at that is, sure, all of us have talents, right? The Holy Spirit fills you and you have different gifting. But even beyond that, I think that what God is saying is, I prepare a path for you. And you're going to find fulfillment once you embark in that path. Yep. But sometimes in our eagerness of wanting to do, especially type A personality, you want to do, right? Mm-hmm. Let me go. I want to do. Okay, fine. Be still and know that I'm God. Where does that fit into the picture, right? Yeah. So the fact that sometimes we jump the gun on certain situation, I mean, God is going to use it, obviously, Romans 8:28. But the bottom line is, how about conversing with him ahead of time and saying, is this the path? Because I'm going to be in 100%. Mm-hmm. I'm going to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. But I want to make sure that the path is my correct path. Yeah. And sometimes, unfortunately, you're dealing with people that are very frustrated because they embarked in the wrong path. Yeah. And they didn't really consult, with the maker properly. Yeah. And then they have frustration, they're still getting up early, but they don't have a drive, they don't have enthusiasm, they don't have a passion, they lost passion. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that is kind of sad with some of the young kids in Italy, but I've seen it even here in the U.S. If you even ask them, say, what are you passionate about? What do you get up early in the morning for? Mm-hmm. And a lot of them said, I don't get up early in the morning because I was so wasted last night. So even that, why were you so wasted last night? And as you dig in, you realize they're just numbing their senses. Yeah. And that's sad. I mean, if you don't get excited to get up because the day is ahead of you and you can conquer some things, what do you live for? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a tragedy.
Yeah, maybe there's something even in that too, is that like you find less reason to get up day after day and to do that day after day thing if you don't feel like there's an eternal purpose connected to it.
Exactly.
If it's just day after day, the mundaneness of life can get to us. And sure, discipline helps us with that. But I can't help but wonder too, well, I know this is true, is that perhaps the best way to look at this, or one of the ways to look at it, is that our lives are comprised of discipline, and that helps us here. We can conquer here with discipline. The most disciplined people, even without God, I think you'd agree, you probably saw some in your athletic days,
sure,
can do some pretty amazing things. And without God is a little bit like maybe without God, but maybe not really. But, you can do a lot on your own with just discipline. But
excuse me, one correction. They have a God. You're saying without God, they have a God. Their God is themselves.
Yeah.
Which is even scarier.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So where does that lead? That's a whole different conversation. But so discipline will help you conquer here, but devotion will help you live a life that goes far beyond what you could just do while you're here.
And you did it with your hands, actually. You're dealing with the vertical instead of the horizontal. Mm-hmm. That's huge.
Yeah, and it leaves you empty. So you were operating as an athlete. So you came to Christ in the middle of that career shortly before you
I did. I grew up in Italy, obviously, with, the institutional religion there. And I wanted to be active even at that. So when I was 6, I was an altar boy. Then by the time I was about 11, I started being a reader of the word up in front. And actually seeing things from that perspective, it made me think. Because I was looking at the crowd and I would see people falling asleep. I would see people chatting. Or even myself, I was there for the wrong reason. I'm looking at the little girls in the choir. Yeah. So by the time I was 15 and I had that opportunity of having that record, you start having media, on you. And I'm thinking, my shoulders are not big enough to carry this. I need to find power. Mm-hmm. I couldn't find it in the church, so I went to the occult. I said, okay, maybe it's over here. So I started dabbling with the occult, saw power there, but it was scary. Mm-hmm. So I had that dichotomy for a while, looking for answers in life.
I want to
but-
get to the money shot, but I do got to ask you about what
Okay.
you saw, because I think that would be interesting for people to see too, to know that there's
on the dark side.
Yeah.
So on the dark side, I just started out by reading some books on mind control and whatnot. But then I was kind of intrigued, with seances, and I'd done only one of them because it scared all of us that were present. Literally, we saw some manifestation, and we all freaked out and said no more. But many times it was weird because I would have certain moments where something from within would draw me toward a mirror. So I would be looking at a mirror, staring at my pupils, and then all of a sudden it's almost as if you were going inside of you, and everything was completely black. It's weird. And then you're feeling almost like a volcano erupting. You know that if you continue to focus that way, something is going to happen, and I would just cut it off because I was scared. But I had strange things, happening in that realm. But then when I came to the U.S., I decided I'm not going to go to church anymore. This is it. And I almost threw a challenge to God, kind of an arrogant, it's pretty pathetic, it's part of the personality. But I don't see, maybe arrogant is a strong word, but it was almost a challenge. God, I know you're there because I've experienced certain things with you in the past, but if you really care, come and get me. Mm-hmm. And that was my cry out to him. And then within about a week, something pretty intense happened. So it was kind of a Pauline conversion. Basically I was drawn back to that area where I threw out the challenge, which was a beach behind my house up in Northern California. And basically I felt enveloped by this power, and was scaring me because I didn't know if it was evil or good. Mm-hmm. Remember, when I was doing the evil thing, I was kind of in control of it. I could shut it off. This was overwhelming. I couldn't shut anything off.
Yeah.
And that's why I was scared at first. And I heard the first sentence. Obviously, it wasn't a voice, like an audible voice, but it was much stronger than just a thought.
Yeah.
And was, in essence, saying, "Oh, Peppo, you think you have a lot of friends, but you're alone." And that went right through my heart. I'm going, "Oh, ouch, that hurts." And I realized, on campus, I got all the girls hanging around, the guys hanging around because they want to meet the girls, but who cares about me?
I saw some of your commercials back in the day.
and then the second sentence was, "Peppo, you don't know how to love others because you love yourself too much." Again, another stab right in the heart.
Yeah.
Realizing, many times I'm doing things for people, but am I really doing it for them or for my own self-gratification so that I can pat myself in the back? And then the third basically was, look at the qualities that you have, but give me praise and credit for it. Don't take it for yourself. And so that sensation went away. So I decided I better go to church, tomorrow. That was on a Saturday. So I went to church, and the message had 3 points. And the 3 points were exactly the same thing that I heard the day before. So that really caught my attention. I said, "Oh, whoa, there is something going on. Obviously, you're communicating to me." And that night I had a dream. I dreamed this girl, and I saw her on campus only once. So next morning, Monday morning, I go to college, and it was the first official swimming practice. And who shows up? This girl. So I go up to her and say, "Hey, my name is Peppo, and I had a dream about you last night." She was like, "Whoa," it was this weirdo,
No, boys.
coming on like this. And so we start talking, and it turns out that she was a very committed believer. So she invited me to her church, and I went to her church. And then the pastor said, "Hey, we have a retreat this weekend. Why don't you come up?" So I went to the retreat, and they all had experiences because they had a bonfire going, and they were singing songs. I didn't even know the songs, but one by one they stood up and they said, "I was saved 5 years ago. I was born again 3 years ago. Saved, born again." Came to my turn. I said, "I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Saved from what?"
Yeah.
Born again just didn't make any sense, right?
Yeah, we'll jump into
Sometimes
this,
we
but
get
you-
all these cliches, and for a non-believer, doesn't make sense.
Yeah, we'll jump into this. But so you had here maybe, but not here.
I didn't have much even in here.
You had nothing, okay.
So bottom line, the pastor said, "Hey, if anybody's in need, come on up and we can pray." So I went up, and I told him, I said, "Hey, I don't understand what this business about being born again is. Can you explain that?" And he just went straight into a prayer of salvation.
Yeah.
Repeat after me. So I was repeating. I maybe understood 70% of what he was saying because my English wasn't that good. And so he gave me a hug at the end, saying, "Oh, now you're saved." And I felt trapped. I said, "What did he do? I didn't ask him to do it. I asked him to explain what that is.
Mm-hmm.
So it was complete rejection. Reed
Yeah.
was like, I don't want to talk to you anymore. I want to see that girl. I want to see him. I have 180. And that lasted maybe 3 weeks. And then I went camping with a friend on the beach, still in Northern California. Set up the tent late at night, windy, and I couldn't sleep. So I got out, and as I was walking, I felt like I had 500 pounds on my shoulders, just putting me down on my knees. And my pride was just picking me up and saying, no, you on your knees, never. And maybe I did 3 steps, and I literally collapsed. And basically, I felt like God's hand just grabbing my heart and just pulling it. And I said, okay, I think now I understand. You want this. You don't want this.
Yeah.
When it's convenient for me.
Yeah.
You want my life, and I'm ready to surrender. So that was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an awesome story.
Yeah.
I love that for a couple reasons. One of the things I love about that is that your initial experience to that prayer is not like the typical experience, right? Because people say, oh, I had that prayer and it was just this great moment, or I had that prayer and I've served God from there on out. But that prayer left
Threw me off.
a bitter taste in your mouth. Yeah, so I love that, because here's the thing is that people may not realize that the feelings that they feel, they only want to ascribe it to psychic or phenomenological, maybe like phenomena that you're just experiencing, but they don't recognize that some of the things that you're feeling are God tugging on your heart, trying to get your attention. And it seems like that's exactly what was going on with you in a regular basis at that point in time. So needless to say, at that point in time, your life kind of takes a 180, and you met Jane, who is a phenomenal cook. By the way, I got to ask you. So, do you have any part in that, in her cooking, or does she know how to cook before?
That's all on her. Yeah.
Okay.
She loved to cook in the past, and then the experience in Italy was just mind blowing for her. Sure.
So she definitely married the right guy. There's no doubt about that. All right. So she's a fantastic Italian cook.
Thanks.
Does she ever let you go to Olive Garden while you're here in the States?
Heck, I'm not going by myself either. That was a disappointment when I came to the U.S. and people want to take you to all these Italian restaurants. Yeah. Going, oh please, don't do that to me. It's a torture. Yeah.
It's I imagine it's somewhat like Chinese food when the Chinese come here and they're like, let's go to a Chinese food restaurant, and they're like, what in God's name is that? Because that is not Chinese food. But yeah, I wondered about that with you, because it's fantastic, probably the best Italian food I've ever had when we were having dinner together.
Thanks.
But yeah, we probably don't have anything that can really hang too well, at least in Chattanooga, per se.
Well, a couple of places that are pretty decent. I don't want to advertise them, but the U.S. has come a long ways. I remember when I came in '79, Northern California was just a disaster. You had to go to San Francisco to find something that was close to home. But see, part of it I think is also when you're getting raw materials, i.e. your ingredients to make a particular sauce. Well, you get a tomato in Italy and it's ripened because it comes from a mile away.
Yeah, you just picked
so you have an explosion of flavor in your mouth. So when you're using that, and then you're using the right meat, the right herbs, you're assembling ingredients that are just fantastic. Here you're dealing with stuff that has been picked maybe a month and a half ago, so the taste already changes. So even though the variant might only be 5% per ingredient, by the time you're done, it's a different dish.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And the acidity in tomatoes, at least I know this, absolutely raises the longer it's off the vine. Yeah. All right, so I want to dig in with you to the kind of the subject of the head-heart issue with Christianity, because we were talking about indie thinker, and you kind of pushed back on me and you said, well, read, and I think this is relevant because the reality is I think that there are other probably Christians that I know who maybe watch the podcast or see what I'm doing or something like that, and they would say, Reed, what is the role of a podcast that's dedicated to help people think critically about these issues, when what we desperately need is for people to have a relationship, or to have their hearts touched by God, and really need an experience with God more so than to have an education on who God is, and I thought that was a valid critique, and I wanted to just dig into that a little bit, because I know there's people who have that question, like, what is the role of the mind? What is the role of education in Christianity? And what is the role of critical thinking in Christianity and all that stuff? So you told me, and if you remember, you were talking to me about your context immediately with a lot of the people that you work with, especially in Italy, who predominantly are Catholic. And then a lot of people are going to have kind of a rough head knowledge of of Christianity. But even statistically speaking, correct me if I'm wrong here, but statistically speaking, there's going to be people who say that they're Catholic but barely ever go to church. Like, I mean, like 60, what was it, 60% or something like that?
Yeah, there are different statistics, so it depends which group actually does the analysis. You know, most of the time they tell, the general statistic is 97% of the people in Italy are Catholic.
Yeah.
So it seems like almost ethnicity and belief are kind of going hand in hand.
Yeah.
You're Italian, therefore you're Catholic. But there are some interesting things happening. I had a discussion with a friend of mine maybe 6 or 7 years ago because I read some articles about this, about people being unbaptized. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
No.
Quite interesting.
I've heard rebaptized, not unbaptized.
Well, here's the deal, because you talk to a typical Catholic and you say, no, are you a Christian? And say, no, yes, I was baptized. So that's what they default back to, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I was 2 months old, 3 months old, 4 months old. I was baptized, therefore I'm a Christian. And then you're looking at their lifestyle and going, oh, whoa, okay, I don't want to judge, but the fruit that I'm seeing, are leading me in a different direction. So having a discussion with this one gal, basically her daughter said, I wanted to be unbaptized. And apparently there is a document that the Vatican issues for a release, if you wish, of that person.
Yeah.
Because it's been forced onto them unwillingly. You're an infant. You cannot say, hey, objection, I don't want this thing, right? So later on in life, some of these people have a chance to say, no, hey, get me off the books. So that kind of puts a big question mark. How can you say that you're a Christian just because you were baptized when you're an infant?
Yeah.
If now quite a lot of people are actually getting unbaptized.
Yeah.
See, so
that's super interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's, needless to say, a lot of people would classify themselves as Catholic, but then maybe practicing Catholic is a totally different story.
Correct. So you're looking at that big number. You're looking at that 97%. But then the statistic is saying, okay, how many people actually go to church more than Easter, Christmas, and the day of
Sounds
the
like
dead,
the Bible Belt in the South.
Exactly. So that number, by the time you're done, actually drops down to the high 30s. So you're looking at 37, 38 that is actually committed to more than 12 times a year going to church.
Okay. Yeah. So that's kind of what I'm talking about is that I think this is interesting in terms of just kind of like classifying Christianity just as a cultural phenomenon, but certainly for Christians as well, just kind of look at this. So needless to say, the vast majority of those people, because we can just kind of jump to the end. The vast majority of those people, the Vatican has ordered some studies and some surveys, and I just want to see what you thought about this. And then other Catholic organizations have also done statistics, and statistics are statistics, but it'll tell us something. But the vast majority of the people who have left the Catholic faith, maybe even unbaptized, but at least when they've done studies against millennials specifically and said, are you still engaged in church? If not, why not? The vast majority of those people, interestingly enough, did not say that they left the Catholic Church because of any of the corruption that they see, leadership issues, maybe even like the scandals with pedophilia or anything like that, money issues. The overwhelmingly, again and again and again, the reason that most people have left the Catholic faith has been because that they did not find a way to reconcile Christian faith with logic and reason. So I thought that was incredibly interesting. So they, in other words, it's like saying this, that they did not understand that Christianity could be relevant to their life, that it has something to say to them. That's the vast majority of people who have left the Catholic faith. Now, and I don't know what that looks like in the evangelical world and in the United States, but I would ventured to guess that it's probably pretty similar. So I really do think that this podcast, if it doesn't sound too self-congratulatory, and what we're doing here is plays a really, really important role of hopefully bridging the gap between the head and the heart, and helping us see that within the Christian world, those two things don't have a distance. Those two things are both under the authority of God, and God wants to touch both areas of those life. Now, for you and me both, we had phenomenological experiences. We had an experience with God that convinced us that the gospel was true. We believe that that's real. We believe other people can experience that as well. But then I hear other stories about people like C.S. Lewis, who initially came to Christ simply from an intellectual perspective. I think Ravi Zacharias too, although I know, scandal aside, his story was that way too, that before he really had an experiential relationship with God, he initially came to the gospel because it started to make sense to him. He started to understand it. I think this is super important too, because I know you've dealt with this as I have,
Sure.
that there's so many people who don't understand that it's not just superstition. You know, I heard somebody the other day classify faith as belief in lack of evidence. And that's, for the Christian, that's not what faith is at all.
They haven't researched it enough
Yeah.
for them to say that.
Well, who they
So,
are
you
is
know,
a well-known atheist. So I can understand they don't understand what Christians actually believe faith is. But faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. So I know you would say this too, that there's an evidence for the Christian faith, that if you take the time to research it and not just mock it or just treat it as though it's some mythological ancient religion that people who don't think for themselves still believe in. If you actually take the time to research Christianity, there's a lot of evidence there that I think wins the hearts of even the most hardened skeptic if they're really honest about that search.
A couple of things, since you put so many things out on the table. The first one, you know, talking about the youth in Italy. I had an example about 15 years ago. My own nephew went through confirmation. And the cardinal that actually gave the message, you know, did a great job. So afterward, I just went in the back, you know, to congratulate him. And we had a discussion. I told him, I said, I'm, you know, a former Catholic, and I had a revelation. I was in the U.S. and I received Christ as my Savior, and I live, you know, my faith through the Protestant, you know, belief. And what was humbling was for him to say, "Please pray for me."
Wow.
So that was remarkable. You know, a cardinal that is telling a Protestant, the enemy, please pray for me, right?
Yeah.
So that was beautiful. But then what he said, you know, it really hit me hard. He said, and also pray for these kids, because probably we will never see 90% of them anymore in church. And I went, wow, what did you do to them? And in essence, he's saying, no, we just burned them out. So that's a problem. You're going through the mechanics.
Yeah.
You have to have X amount of hours of catechism.
Right.
You know, what are you doing during that hour of catechism? I don't know, but kids are falling asleep. They're completely disinterested. They don't feel that they're connecting with the message at all. So they go through the process. They go through the emotion and the hours, because they need to have X amount of hours in order to do that sacrament, right? But, you know, my nephew himself is an example of that. I mean, he just checked it out. So that's something that needs to be rectified, you know, within the system. That's the first thing. And the other one I forgot, because you put a few things out there. I said, I gotta pick up. There are. I think we're talking about sensationalism. Italian, especially in the southern part of Italy, they're very much sensationalist. So give me the miracle, and I believe whatever you want me to believe.
All right.
Which is a big problem,
Yeah.
right? So that's another statistic that I read maybe 10 years ago. I was on a train, and I read this article, and I actually had a priest in front of me. So as I read the article, it was kind of disturbing. They were saying, who do the Italian pray to? And they gave a list of names. So number one was Padre Pio. Padre Pio was a friar that was born in the late 1800s, I think 1896 or so. He died in 1967. Supposedly, he received the stigmatas, and he did different miracles. So people were drawn to him. So 35% of the people were praying to him, number one. Number two, Mary. Number three, I think, was San Gennaro, which is the saint protector of the city of Naples. Number four, I don't remember, but I think Christ was either number 5 or number 6.
Okay.
He didn't even make the podium, poor guy. Not even the wooden medal. It's just insane. So I'm looking at the priest and I say, "No, hey, have you read this article?" He goes, "No." I said, "No, well, take 10 minutes, and read it." So he read it, and then I said, "No, what do you think of it?" And he said, "It's our mistake." And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. So we had a nice dialogue, and turned out that he was actually he graduated with a degree in jurisprudence in law. So he was one of those that you pay if you want to nullify your marriage.
Okay.
There is a way of kind of moving through those, maze and get your marriage annulled. If you want to get out of it. But nice conversation with him, and at least he was taking some of the responsibility, saying, "No, we've gone wrong."
Yeah. So what percentage did Jesus get on that?
Oh, he was number 5 with maybe. I don't think he made double digits. I think it was like 9% or so. And that's the sad part,
Yeah.
Because then you're looking at the Christian consumer, who can give me what I want.
Yeah.
And it's completely warped theology.
Yeah.
God is supreme, period.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But I think we have the same problem here. We find the more we look at these things that we're probably more alike than we are different. I think we have the same problem here. But if that poll was taken, people would still put Jesus at the top of the list. The problem is they would put Jesus at the top of the list, but it would be a Jesus of their own imagination. It wouldn't be the Jesus of the Bible, the historical Jesus, the Jesus that revealed himself to the world. It would be the Jesus that they want him to be.
The one that says, "Come and follow me," which means you give up everything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not the Jesus that says, "Take up your cross, deny yourself." They hated me, guess what? They're going to hate you too. It's not that Jesus. And here's how we can kind of put that to the test, perhaps, is, and you were at church this past Sunday too, and I think this is a good way of looking at it, is that Dietrich Bonhoeffer talked about a style of Christianity that is faith without repentance. Or in other words, you could also look at it like this, that it's Christianity without action. And ultimately, that's really kind of what I believe is so important about what we're doing with this podcast, is because I'm trying to look at Christianity. Now, it's just conversation, and I agree. It's got to go deeper than that. But at least I'm trying to grapple with current events, political issues, cultural issues, causes that are going on in the world that maybe even Christians don't know about. And I think all of that is incredibly relevant because at the end of the day, there is an element of the Protestant faith that has taught us justification by faith apart from works. And then we totally throw works out the window. And now maybe it's a little bit of the reverse in the Italian world, in the predominantly Catholic world. But I think too, if we confess Christ, we're the confessing church. We've got the right doctrine, but there is no action. There is nothing that becomes salt and light in the world. There is no city on a hill that's shining a light into the issues of our day and making a difference in these issues. And we're just standing back in the church and using that as our corner to cower back into instead of going out into the world and allowing the Christian perspective to be heard on these issues. Then I think that we're making the same mistake that you just kind of illustrated, where we are not engaging this next generation, we're not engaging the culture, and we're not even engaging Jesus. Because you'd be hard pressed to convince me that Jesus wasn't somebody that was in the thick of everything that was happening in the first century and saying, hey, there's a different way. Now, he may be explicitly like Word of God because he was the Word of God, but there was a voice that was heard, the voice of one crying in the wilderness to begin with, and then the voice of Christ to take his place, to baptize with fire and water the people in society. And so I don't know if that makes sense, but essentially I just think that if we're not careful, what will happen with the evangelical Protestant church in America is that we'll change Jesus into this person that can benefit you, but it won't actually change into us changing the world. It'll all be all about changing us and our circumstances, but it won't be about changing the world. And that's, I hope, and I think that that's where this kind of comes into play. And I think that's why Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. And he even goes further, Paul does, maybe not further, but Paul says, how can you know what the will of God is? How can you serve God? By letting your mind be transformed according to the Word of God. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And then you'll be able to know what the will of the Lord is. So I really think that this plays such a significant role, and even sometimes I think we underestimate it. I don't want to put too much emphasis on it because I think that we can make a danger there too, but I think it's both. I think we've got to bridge the gap between both of these things. And Christians got to be outspoken. They got to be thoughtful on issues. They need to have a perspective, and they need not to just cower behind the four walls of their church and just say, well, we'll just talk about faith issues. That's my thoughts anyway.
Well, it's great thought, and again, you can go on probably for hours discussing all of them. You mentioned something, love the Lord thy God with all your mind, your soul, and sometimes, you even ask people, what's the difference between a soul and a spirit, right? And you can even make the differentiation of the two. And I read something a while back, they were saying, well, soma, the body is physical, tangible, so you can recognize it, but it's the temple of your Holy Spirit. So what you do with that temple is important, right? Yeah. Then the mind, psyche, we get psychic, it's actually horizontal behavior. Mm-hmm. So it's the way you're interacting with somebody else, the way you're shaping your way of thinking and doing things. Yeah. But it's horizontal. And sometimes what we try to do is we want to use the mind, the psyche, to reach God. Well, it's not capable because it's horizontal. It can be the opening, but unless you go to the soul, you go to the ruach, you go to the breath of God, that is the only thing that is vertical.
Yeah.
And that's why that needs to be awakened.
Yeah.
So it's there, but needs to be awakened.
I agree, totally.
So spending time to realize, okay, I have these three dimensions, but how do they function in relationship to God, the Creator, is important, and you have to consider that.
I think that's sanctified living, if you ask me. In fact, the word integrity doesn't just mean to be honest or to tell the truth. The word integrity means to be whole. So I think true sanctification, true Christianity looks like us thinking about. And ultimately, maybe that's what I'm doing, is just grappling with Indie Thinker, is trying to figure out what that looks like. And as a Christian living in the world with these things happening. But a sanctified life, a Christian life, looks like one who is integrating, who is whole, their mind, their body, and their spirit in one. And those things are functioning together under the authority and the dominion of Jesus Christ. Yeah. And those things are functioning the way they need to be. So absolutely, I'd agree.
Yeah, and he needs to permeate every aspect of your life, you know, whether you're at work, whether you are by yourself, because when you are by yourself, that's the true identity that does come out, whether you are with your spouse, your kids, whatever it is.
For sure.
And we all lack a lot. I mean, me in premise, I'm still working to that process
I'm pretty amazing. I pretty much got it, but I understand there's other people.
That's why you're doing the podcast, right? You're there. You're arrived.
Just to tell everybody else how to get it done. No, go ahead.
Oh, so that's that's that, and sometimes even in ministry, you're even more convicted because you say, no, wait a minute, you talk a great talk, but let's look at the action as well, because you need to be in sync, and that's one of the things actually that the youth in Italy is turned off by is also the hypocrisy. So okay, the word is not relevant. I don't even know it. They rammed it down my throat. I don't want anything to do with it. But then also I see the hypocrisy. I don't want any part of it. Yeah. So they're drawn actually to people that are vulnerable. They're drawn to people that are admitting their faults. They're basically saying, hey, I need a savior. Why? Because daily I blow it.
All right. So with that being said, I want to just kind of jump ship a little bit on that subject and talk to you a little bit about COVID. All right. So you were there, pretty much throughout everything, right? From the moment.
No. Actually, I was lucky. I was lucky because I lived there vicariously through my teammates that were there. So what happened, actually, Jen and I, we left for 4 days to go to Turkey because I wanted to do some spearfishing. I needed some time off. And then we're supposed to go back to Italy and 2 weeks later come to the U.S. So we got to Istanbul, and then all of a sudden, the airline 2 days later said, we're not flying back to Italy. Wow. We're shutting down because cases start to mount. This is the end of February, and so we start realizing, okay, we have to take a boat to Greece, and then from there maybe try to reach the coast. So after we discussed it, we decided, you know what? It's 2 weeks away. Let's just go to the U.S. directly. Mm-hmm. So I left the luggage behind, and we took off, and we came here with carry-ons. But yes, we basically arrived here on March the 8th, and our teammates lived through it, because one of them came back in June and the other one came back in August. So we were connecting with them via Zoom. So we're still doing gospel on Sunday via Zoom, but they would tell me, what was going on. It was just insane, absolutely insane. So one of the biggest problem, I think we discussed that the other night, is the fact that there is a town just south of Milano. It's actually part of the suburbs of Milano. It's called Segrate, where they have a big 5G plan. So a lot of people from Wuhan came over because of the 5G problem with Huawei that was underway.
So they actually came from Wuhan?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
Oh yeah. So there was a lot of that exchange going on, and then was also coinciding with the Chinese New Year. So all of a sudden, cases in Milano and the provinces, because people would commute in and out of Milano, were just mounting up, like crazy, and that was pretty much at the middle of February, and then by the beginning of March was all over Italy.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people who may not know this. So there's a lot of Chinese immigrants or even Chinese nationals that live in Italy and do a lot of business and that kind of stuff.
Correct.
So is that why it was such a kind of hot spot for COVID?
That one particular area because was directly connected to one, but then because of the Chinese New Year, people that lived in, there is an area north of Florence, it's called Prati, where they have probably 60% of the population there is Chinese.
Wow.
It's insane. So there are different pockets, and all these people that went over, they were exposed, came back and spread it. But also the Italians went to what they call their ski week.
Okay.
At the end of February, beginning of March, typically schools shut down. They give you 1 week to go ski anywhere.
Okay.
And so they didn't know how to handle it at the beginning. It was kind of a, trial and error. And so people went skiing, they're inside of the gondola, just jam one with the other, and they just spread it all over Italy. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Now, because it was so serious there, so severe, and I don't even know what the fatality count was at the end of the day there, but at least we know when it was in the high season for COVID, that Italy was always on the news. Mm-hmm. So because it was so severe there were kind of some severe lockdown restrictions there. So tell us a little bit about what it was like kind of navigating around during that time, because we've had kind of a tense relationship with restrictions with masks here in the U.S.
Yeah, but it's nothing like it.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing like it. I mean, I talked to some friends, some Chinese friends, and they were saying, the lockdown in China was insane, where people literally were locked inside of the room from the outside.
They were welding doors shut to keep them
Exactly.
inside. Yeah.
So Italy was not at that level. But basically, what they stated, for instance, you're allowed to go and get grocery, but it's only one person going and get the grocery. So if you were in a car with somebody else, they would fine you. And then you had to have a document.
It didn't matter if it was like a wife or somebody from your house?
No, they could care less.
Okay.
They could care less. Then you had to have in the document, you had to state also, I live on this particular street and I'm going to this particular store. So if you were stopped and you were outside of the area, also you will get fined. Yeah. And then it got to the point even that they said maximum 200 meters from your residence if you're out walking. Okay, so a lot of people took the dogs out, so they borrowed dogs from neighbors, literally, to say, I got to go out, I'm going to go insane. And it was funny because I think I might have mentioned to you one of my guys, the guys in our group, in the church group, he has a good voice, so he put out a little jukebox, is that you call it, boombox or whatever you call it, and started singing. Yeah. So he was doing his own concerts at night at 5 o'clock, boom, and like clockwork. He
thank
would
God
have,
for people like that. I can only imagine.
Yeah. It was just to maintain sanity. It was just nuts. And then they got to the point where all of a sudden they started using drones. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's how bad it got.
Now that sounds so super like 1984 George Orwell kind of like sci-fi craziness.
Yeah.
So what were they using the drones for?
To identify people that were just wandering around, especially in more remote areas.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So would they use them to like maybe, I'm just guessing here, but would they use them to kind of like track the distance of people to make sure that they weren't going over the distance they were supposed to go?
They get your identity. By the way, now everybody, I just talked to some of my friends last week, they're all getting electronic IDs right now.
Yeah.
They're required to get their electronic IDs. And they're still going through with...
Is that to track people?
Yeah.
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 That is so crazy.
So
right?
on that ID, they will actually start loading up information, i.e., have you been vaccinated, which type of vaccine, when did you do it, and so on and so forth.
And now, is there any like kind of social acceptance associated in terms of like what you can and can't do based upon that card? Like, will they let you into certain stores?
They are trying to limit travel. It hasn't passed yet.
Okay.
The EU had a certain article that was approved maybe 10 months ago saying we're not going to go down that path
Yeah.
of forcing people
Yeah.
to be vaccinated in order to travel. But now they are revisiting that particular article, and they're trying to push for minimum vaccination in order to travel.
Okay. Yeah. So here's the thing is that I can see the benefits of some of this stuff. Like, sincerely, like, I understand that they may be coming from a good place with trying to say, like, perhaps, let's just say this. Well, they've been vaccinated, so let's not force them to wear a mask. I mean, they've been vaccinated, but that's probably not true, right? That's me.
But
being
that's the
charitable.
problem. You're vaccinated and you still have to wear a mask. Now
Yeah,
they're talking
same thing
about
here.
using the mask through the rest of the year
Yeah.
and probably into 2022.
I mean, here we're starting to experience some of this stuff. But okay, so here's the question that I had, especially for somebody like you who's in the thick of that stuff, because I've really wondered about this and I've grappled with it. Is do Christians have a responsibility to steer the course of history, the course of their government with their conscience, with their moral foundation in issues like this? So I understand we have to be careful because we're not going to conflate Christianity with local government or with the state or anything like that. We don't want to go back to Christendom, at least I don't. But I also think that, boy, this could get out of hand really quick. And especially people who have the right motives but are doing the wrong things. I wonder who's going to stop them from doing that if Christians don't stand up and really say something about it and voice their concern. And I want to hear what you have to say about that. But just for instance, we just had Artur Pawlowski. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's the guy that was arrested in Calgary for having church services that weren't socially distanced according
The one in Canada?
Yeah, the guy in Calgary.
Yeah.
And so I'm just thinking to myself, there's got to, like, this, even this kind of history of civil disobedience does root from Christianity. Like, the word Protestant means Protestant.
That's right.
And thank God for Martin Luther, a guy. I mean, he wasn't perfect, but thank God for a dude that was willing to kind of say enough is enough. And I think we have a rich history of that as Christians, and I think that we might have a role in terms of the overarching oppressive things that can happen in the name of COVID. So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, aside from Christianity, I think nobody likes to be controlled. I mean, Italians are, infamous for that. You go back in history and you're seeing the guy on the hill of Tuscany with his own little army, and then the next guy, the next hill, he has his own little army. So all independent, So sometimes when you're thinking about, I think we might even mention that, thinking about Europe united, saying, are you kidding me? You cannot even put Italy together. But anyway, so we don't like to be controlled. And one of the things that happened most recently, as of Monday of last week, a lot of those measures have been kind of toned down because they realize that people start rebelling.
Yeah.
So I've seen videos that friends would send from Milano, from Firenze, from Napoli. They still have a curfew. So technically between 10 and 6, you're not supposed to go out and congregate. But, some of these videos, they're showing 10:30 at night, and you have maybe 1,500 people in the square saying, we are not going to submit to this because it's nonsense. It's absolutely nonsense. So how far can they play with those cards? Because to me, it's just abuse of power, period. Yeah. Right? So Christian or non-Christian, there is so much you can tolerate before you actually have a revolution. Yeah, okay. But I think on the Christian side, yes, we have to look at, is this logical at all? And if you start pushing a different agenda, then I want to put some resistance. And I think we should be vocal, done in love. I mean, that's the thing that always boils down to. I've seen some ugly things done. And unfortunately, it's sad, but you have relationships that are strained even among believers because people don't see eye to eye, whether it's a political agenda or COVID, themselves. But I think it's not fair to tell me, for instance, you got to wear the mask out of respect. I have an immune system. I gave blood, and they came back with the results. And I have my own antibodies against SARS-1, SARS-2, and SARS-2S.
Yeah.
So I cannot communicate that or receive it. So somebody can say, well, but the next person doesn't know. I know. And if you ask me, I tell you.
Yeah.
So what's the sense of me being restricted if I don't need to be restricted?
Right.
So I think there is a delicate shift there where you're made feel guilty if you don't respect. And that's the way they're looking at it. Well, you're not respecting someone else.
Yeah. It's social shaming.
Exactly right. Yeah.
And my biggest concern, and I know I'm going to sound like a typical American here probably, but my biggest concern here is, maybe not my biggest, but one of them is the incremental encroachment upon liberty. Because I think the way that you take liberties away from people without revolution is slowly but surely, little by little.
That's right.
That's
how you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time.
One bite at a time.
Yeah.
And it's the way you destroy this great constitution that's lasted for so long and kept us one of the freest nations in the world, inarguably. So there's that concern for me, sincerely, and I feel like maybe I'm just getting older and paranoid, but I feel like that concern more now than ever before in my life, that we have to understand freedom. Mm-hmm. We have to understand what true justice looks like, not just social justice, but biblical justice, and to understand what truth looks like. And
before you reach a point of no return.
That's right.
That's critical.
Yeah. So you incrementally dim the lights, and slowly but surely you can't tell. You're in the dark, and then at that point it's too late. But you think about people like Martin Niemöller, who said, "I didn't say anything when they came for the Jews. I didn't say anything when they came for the gypsies. I didn't say anything when they came for da 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 da. And then they finally came for me, and there was nobody left to speak." Mm-hmm. And so I don't want to exaggerate. Mm-hmm. I don't want to overreact, but that's also the thing that we say to ourselves to keep us in the darkness. Don't overreact. Don't exaggerate. And then all of a sudden we realize, we don't go to that place where we say, "I told you so." And I guess I'm saying this because I sense things changing in our nation.
Absolutely.
I sense
at an alarming rate. Yeah. At an alarming rate. And that's the thing. History kind of repeats itself. So if anything, let's go back and view what happened before.
Absolutely.
So that we don't repeat the same mistakes. That's a scary part. So a whole idea of cancel culture wants to tell you that. Let's remove all of that so that we can have a fresh start. Wait a minute, then I'm not going to learn from what the past taught me any longer. And then you can tell me whatever agenda you want, and I have to, oblige. Is that how you say? Oblige?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a moral obligation to fight injustice wherever it is seen, and to stand for the truth wherever it's seen. Now, here's the big problem. We live in a postmodern world, and maybe post-postmodern or meta-modern world, where we say, well, who is the one that's going to stand up for the truth, and who is the one to say that what the truth is? Okay, fine. We can have that conversation, but I just know this, that if individuals don't say it for themselves, then that void is not going to stay a void. It will be replaced by other people. Mm-hmm. And the one thing we talked about too, the last thing I kind of just I'll bring up and just kind of get your thoughts on is I made a video just a while back, and it was about crisis, and we just seem to have like one every other week. Like right now, of course, it's our crisis.
Yeah, it's our
crisis in the Southeast, but got people running on gas stations right now because of that pipeline that got hacked, and it's just like nuts. Like I don't know if I'm sure you saw it yesterday, but I still see it today that there are places running out of gas, and then there are just lines and lines of cars lining up at gas stations. But it just seems like there's one crisis after another that's being either manufactured or just happening one way or the other from the pandemic on. And I know from history. I'm a history teacher, for whatever that's worth, but I know from history, just from my own personal study, that is a ripe, fertile ground for totalitarian regimes, for people to take advantage of crisis to usurp power, because when people are desperate, they do desperate things. They try communism, they try socialism. They say, hey, what's a million lives if it's going to make our world a better place? What's a couple of Jews thrown in a concentration camp if it's for the betterment of the state? And then all of a sudden we find ourselves down this slippery slope. So again, that sounds like exaggeration only if it doesn't happen, but if it does, then we should have listened. So
That's great.
Does that sound crazy? Does that sound crazy?
I don't think it's crazy. No, I don't think it's crazy. I think that we're heading down that direction. But then also, as a Christian perspective, you're looking at potentially the end times, and we know what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
So with that mindset, you're saying, okay, is this the beginning of the birth pains?
Yeah.
Because if that's the case, then there is nothing really that we can do to change it. I think we should be vocal about it, but can we change that destiny? No.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I don't want to be caught saying, "Oh, you haven't even tried."
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think so. There's two things. Maybe we can make a difference, and we can maybe not slow it down, but we can do what we need to do. Like Jeremiah was called to prophesy to the nation, even though they were going to Babylon as a witness against them. So even though the end result was going to be unchanged by Jeremiah, God still had him there as a voice speaking to those people. So there's that. But then also too, we got to take some people with us. Yeah. We have to remember that we are called to make a difference while we're here, and that perhaps, this is one thing that I've ended a lot of podcasts on because I keep on coming back to this, perhaps in the midst of all the kind of crazy thing that's going on in this generation, this might be the ripest, most fertile opportunity for the church if we're not totally concerned about our social cred score and about winning points on Instagram or social media or whatever, by putting a black square up or anything like that, but we actually get serious about the gospel and we get serious about winning people. This is a fertile time for them because crisis also, it may make people desperate and give away their freedom, but it can also help them do some soul searching. So this is an opportunity, I think, for the church to be the church and to just say, hey, there's hope in the midst of crisis. Absolutely.
And the whole idea of hope is it's huge and something that Italy really doesn't have. I mean, what I've sensed during 2020 was fear.
Yeah.
Whoever you talk to, there was an exaggerated amount of fear. Fear of the unknown, right? But, perfect love casts out fear. So for a believer, it doesn't matter. I think it was Babe Ruth that says, you can't defeat a man that doesn't quit.
Yeah.
So the whole idea for us as believers is it doesn't matter if I'm going to end tomorrow this way or I'm going to end in a year, in 10 years, if it's a disease, if it's an accident. I'm in his palms, and that brings me comfort. So when I was talking to my Italian friend, I said, no, you can be overwhelmed by what the media is telling you because they're also changing their tune. So they don't even know themselves. So go with the truth.
Yeah.
And then you point him back to the truth, and you try to ground him in that truth that comes from above. And that truth will set you free.
Yeah, amen to that, man. I was talking with somebody the other day, and if he's listening, this is for you, buddy. And he said, I just had to turn off the news because I just couldn't deal with it anymore. It's too much emotional. It made me too angry, made me too depressed.
Yeah.
And here's the promise that we have as Christians, is that maybe you still need to turn the news off. However, it affects you differently. Because if your hope is only in this world, how hopeless are we?
You're doomed.
Especially right now where there just seems like there's a new crisis every day. But if you have an existential hope, an anchor for your soul that's bigger than this world, you can step back when everybody's running on gas prices and you're like me and you're looking for a home and there's barely anything in the market and prices are being driven up so crazy. We're headed towards inflation because of how much money we're throwing out to everybody under the Biden administration and all that stuff. And you can step back from that and say, God, you're doing it for my good. Like, there's no way you can do that except that you have an existential anchor called Jesus that's keeping your soul in the midst of the storm.
Yes.
And that's what we need at this hour. So, that said, thank you so much for providing that for so many people and the work that you're doing in Italy, especially for what you're about to step into with young people. As you kind of dive into that, I'd love to have you maybe come back via Zoom when you're back out there.
Sure, we'd love to.
Let me know what's going on, and if that statistic that we talked about is starting to shift a little bit based upon what you guys are doing.
Yeah, it's his work, it's not mine.
Yeah.
But I'm making myself available, like you are, because the mission field is not just another country. Is the moment you open your door and you get out. Actually, it's even inside of your house.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being a hero,
All right.
and thanks so much for what you're doing, and thanks for the time today.
All right. Ciao.
See you, everybody. Our thanks again to our guests for being on the show today. Indie Thinker with Reed Uberman was brought to you by our sponsors. If you like what you heard today, please do us a big favor and give it a 5-star review and like it and share it with friends. And if you want to hear more awesome guests, make sure to check out past episodes. Indie Thinker is a nonprofit paid for by our sponsors and the generous gifts of people like you. In order to hear more great guests like you did today, please consider giving a tax-deductible gift by going to indythinker.org. And just remember, your voice matters, but infinitely more when you think for yourself.